Muy buenos días para todos y bueno, pues bienvenidos todos a esta edición de Palabra Viva en Vivo, la reunión de Palabra Viva. Como de costumbre me acompaña mi hijo y estamos listos para compartir con ustedes un tema que pienso que ambos consideramos que es de suma importancia, rescatando a nuestros hijos, pero primero un saludo.
Welcome every single one of you to the newest edition of Living Word Live. Jesus, my father, and I'm Gio. Our virtual meeting this week in the approximately, we're leading up to Thanksgiving now. We have a very important topic for our audience, and it is rescuing our children, and we hope that this would edify you.
Antes de proceder, un par de anuncios.
Now, before we continue, we'd like to announce a few things.
Primeramente, el chat está abierto para que ustedes presenten sus preguntas y o sus motivos de oración.
First and foremost, you'll note on your screen that the chat is available. You can present your prayer petitions, but you can also ask questions, and we will attempt to refer ourselves to them during the transmission.
Número 2, les he prácticamente rogado que hagan uso de nuestro muro en Telegram.
And this is an important one as well. We have asked our audience, and we are asking again that you were to subscribe to our channel on Telegram.
Yo pienso que estamos a solo unos días, puedo equivocarme, de que Facebook nos cancele.
I think, according to one of the latest incidents that Facebook itself has initiated, we might be a few days away from Facebook canceling our account.
Esto es importante porque ustedes se enteran de nuestras actividades principalmente a través de Facebook.
This is important because I know many of you, you find out about our activities and upcoming transmissions through Facebook.
Por eso le hemos pedido, le hemos rogado que se unan a nosotros en lo que estamos haciendo en Telegram.
This is why we're asking you to subscribe to Telegram, because the possibility exists that Facebook would look to censor us within the next few days.
¿Qué hacemos nosotros que ofende a Facebook? Pregunta usted.
Now, some would ask, what are you doing that would offend Facebook so?
Bueno, opinamos acerca de COVID-19, o opinamos acerca de los supuestos cambios climatológicos, etcétera, etcétera, etcétera.
Well, we opine about COVID, we opine about the so-called climate change issue and other things.
De modo que ya hemos recibido, ¿cómo es que le llaman ellos? Las amenazas, las amonestaciones de que no podemos insistir en esta nuestra postura porque van a tener que cerrar nuestras páginas. Entonces le dejamos saber a ustedes que si no nos encuentran en Facebook, ya saben lo que sucedió.
Therefore, since we continue to comment on these things from a biblical perspective, Facebook continues to threaten us, and the latest threat came as recently as a few days ago, where they're looking to shut us down. So therefore, we're asking again that you were to subscribe to our channel on Telegram, because we know there that we won't be censored.
Algunas personas son nuevos al programa Telegram. Quisiera tomar un minuto y explicarle cuán fácil es en realidad suscribirse.
Now, some people are new to Telegram, and it's actually much easier and much more accessible to use than Facebook. Through Facebook, unless you have the app loaded on your phone, and we really don't want that because of the privacy issues, it's much easier to subscribe to our channel on Telegram. Simply download the Telegram app through either the Google Play Store or
simplemente bajen el programa de Telegrama de la tienda Google o otra tienda que usted escoja para las aplicaciones.
And just look for the name Telegram.
Y busque el nombre Telegrama.
And then you'll be able to find us under Palabra Viva Miami.
Y luego nos podrá encontrar bajo Palabra Viva Miami.
Now, if you're looking more specifically for the actual address, you'll note that we have just placed it on the chat.
Ahora, si quieres específicamente la dirección de nuestro muro, ahora ya está presente, la puedes ver en el chat.
Once you visit our channel, simply click subscribe, and you'll be automatically subscribed. And every time we post something on that channel, it'll appear on the app.
O sea, si pulsas sobre el enlace y encuentras que ahí dice suscríbete, entonces te suscribes y todas las veces que nosotros coloquemos algo en el muro, te avisará. Telegrama te avisará para que puedas estar al tanto de nuestras actividades.
Exactly.
Bueno, vamos a hablar acerca de nuestros hijos.
Now, let's speak on this edition of Living Word Live of rescuing our children.
Rescatando a nuestros hijos, para ser específico.
To be more specific again, rescuing our children.
Y me voy a permitir colocar una base para el tema de este día.
And I'm going to permit myself to lay a foundation for what we will discuss during the rest of this transmission.
Yo sé que son muchas las familias, los padres que sufren en secreto.
I know that there are many families, more specifically parents, that they suffer in secret.
Posiblemente usted se pregunte, ¿Y cómo usted sabe que esto es así?
And some would ask, how would you know that this is the case?
Como pastor, a uno le toca ver y oír cosas que las personas no quieren que otros se enteren de aquello.
As a pastor, one finds out about certain things that these people in particular, whom are seeking counsel, they don't want others to find out about.
Y resulta que a través de los años he encontrado que lo que sucede en un círculo casi siempre es un microcosmo de lo que está sucediendo a nivel estatal, a nivel nacional y aún internacional.
And I have found that these things, I wouldn't call them incidents, but occurrences and situations, they're microcosms of what can happen within a community, within a state, within a nation, and sometimes internationally.
El número de personas, de familias que está sufriendo es grande.
The numbers of family members whom are suffering for diverse reasons within family issues, it is large.
Repito, sufren en secreto, lloran de noche. Las almohadas pudieran relatar cosas verdaderamente duras, difíciles.
I repeat, they suffer in secret. I'm pretty sure that if pillows, as it were to be able to relate, they would be able to recount the amount of tears and words of hurt and pain that are usually said in the privacy of the bedroom.
La mayoría de los padecimientos, de los sufrimientos de las familias en este día tiene que ver con aquello que le está sucediendo a los chicos, a los jóvenes.
The majority of the sufferings that families are encountering nowadays has to do with what is happening with their children.
Es un golpe durísimo para papá, para mamá, cuando el hijo, la hija, los hijos le dicen, papá, mamá, soy bisexual, me considero transexual, soy homosexual.
It is certainly a harsh thing, a difficult thing to have to hear, for example, children approach their parents and say, I'm a bisexual, or I'm a homosexual, or I'm practicing this sin.
Por supuesto, mamá y papá de inmediato tratan de esconder ese dolor ante los ojos del público.
Can you repeat that again?
Que mamá y papá en ocasiones tratan de esconder el dolor que ahora llevan en el corazón de los ojos del público.
And of course, mom and dad, they try to hide the pain, the anguish that they're feeling from the eyes of the onlooking public.
Pero es tanto que eventualmente llaman a un consejero, en este caso me llaman a mí, o en los casos que yo he manejado, un pastor, porque necesitan ventilar, necesitan expresar su pena y su dolor.
On many instances, then they'll call a person like myself, a minister, because at the very least they need to vent what is in their soul.
En público, como para no traer bochorno a la familia y o a sus hijos, ellos dicen, no, yo apoyo a mis hijos en cualquier decisión que ellos tomen.
In public, they'll say things such as, whatever my children decide, I support them.
Pero por dentro están, si no destruidos, cerca de estar destruidos.
But on the inside, if they're not destroyed, they are closely approaching that particular state.
Dos cosas tengo que decir acerca de esto.
Now, two things I have to comment on this issue.
Número uno, primeramente ante Dios tenemos que asumir la culpa, la responsabilidad, si así es el caso, por permitir que nuestros hijos caigan en las manos de aquellos que los destruyen.
Now, number one, I think we as parents, we have to assume the responsibility for our children falling into the snares of the devil, for our lack of discernment and other reasons.
Pastor, no distribuya culpa, que ya llevo bastante en mi alma.
Pastor, I would ask you, please do not disseminate more fault, more guilt, because I already have enough of this in my soul as it is.
No estoy distribuyendo culpa.
I'm not trying to distribute guilt.
Es el primer paso de dos para encontrar en Dios la solución que deseamos para nuestros hijos.
It's the first step out of two in order to find in God the solutions for our children.
Tú no puedes en realidad arrepentirte si primero no reconoces que has errado, que has pecado, que le has fallado a Dios en tu proceder.
You cannot truly repent unless you understand and acknowledge that you have failed God in some way, shape, or form.
Y si por ignorancia o cualquier otra razón colocaste a tus hijos en las manos de aquellos que lo malogran, entonces tienes que reconocer tu culpa en el asunto.
And if for ignorance or for any other reason you placed your children in the hands of those who would destroy the souls of your children, that's something that you have to recognize and acknowledge.
De modo que reconocer aquello y pedirle a Dios perdón es el primer paso que tenemos que tomar para encontrar la solución que tanto anhelamos.
Therefore, in order to arrive at the solution that we are looking for and to appeal to God, we have to recognize our own shortcomings in these things.
Desagrada muchísimo a Dios cuando intentamos hacerle creer, intentamos engañarle, intentamos hacerle creer que nosotros nada tuvimos que ver con aquello.
It is something disagreeable to God, something that he detests, when we try to cover our own involvement in our shortcomings and not acknowledge it.
Después de proceder con arrepentimiento, lo que tenemos que hacer es entrar en un compromiso con Dios, donde asumimos nuestras obligaciones y luchamos, incluyendo la oración y otras cosas que mencionaré después, para que nuestros hijos sean rescatados.
After we repent, then there needs to be a series of steps that need to be taken, which includes prayer and other things, so as to restore the familial bonds that are necessary in order to edify our children in the Lord.
Así que con ese fundamento, con esa base, procedemos.
Therefore, with this foundation being laid, we will proceed.
Cualquiera que escucha a los adherentes de, vamos a llamarle supergracia,
Whomever hears the adherents of, we'll call it for this edition, those whom promote super grace.
seguramente ha escuchado de la superfe. Vamos a llamarle a este grupo la gente de la supergracia.
I'm going to call this group, let's call them, in order to summarize this, people whom believe in super faith.
Los peores entre este grupo son los calvinistas recalcitrantes.
The worst of this entire group are the recalcitrant Calvinists.
Porque si en alguna manera o medida tú mencionas algo que ellos lo clasifican como obra, automáticamente ellos te descalifican y descartan lo que tú tienes que decir o presentar.
Because if anything you present as a work, something that is dignified, something we have to undertake in the Lord, they'll say, this disqualifies you, you're working, you're not acting in faith.
Así que este grupo no pronunciaría lo siguiente como yo lo voy a pronunciar.
So this group that we are describing, they would not pronounce what I'm about to pronounce in the following manner.
Pero créame, aunque no lo pronuncian así, esto es lo que ellos creen.
But believe me, even though they were to not expressly state this in this manner, this is the essence of what they believe.
Cuando yo me atrevo a decir, Dios ciertamente considera el comportamiento humano,
When I dare say that God does take into consideration human behavior,
y si los que se conducen de tal manera, más específicamente, se dedican a hacer su voluntad, lo hacen debidamente, esto mueve la mano de Dios.
and those that were to do God's will, God then moves his hand in their favor.
Este grupo salta y dice, no, esos son obras y la mano de Dios no se mueve así.
This group would suddenly jump, they would become scandalized, and they'll say, that's not the way God's hand moves.
O sea que ellos ven en el comportamiento, en la conducta humana, obras.
What they see through human behavior are mere works.
Siempre son obras.
It's always reduced to works. More specifically, if I can further define this, it's like working in order to achieve salvation.
Efectivamente, ellos entonces automáticamente lo llevan a su definición y dicen, no, está obrando porque quiere ganarse la salvación.
So once again, they'll say, the reason this person is working is because they want to gain salvation.
Pero yo les voy a mostrar por la palabra de Dios
But I'm going to demonstrate through the Word of God
que ciertamente Dios considera la conducta del ser humano
that certainly God does take into account man's behavior.
y que la conducta que le agrada, por así decirlo, mueve la mano de Dios.
And the conduct that is pleasing to him, God then moves his hand in favor, in benevolence towards those that do righteousness.
Recuerde, la gente de la supergracia va a decir, no, eso es obra y Dios se mueve únicamente por gracia.
Remember, those that believe in this so-called super faith, they'll say, no. God only moves through grace and that's it.
Dígame, amigo, amiga, si se fijó en lo siguiente acerca de estos que viven abrazados de la supergracia.
Dear brother, dear sister, I would ask you to take note, and I would ask you if you have noticed the following characteristic from this group in particular.
Cualquier y todo desenvolvimiento justo, agradable a Dios, que uno pueda decir Dios se fijó en aquello y por ende bendijo, ellos dicen no es así, es mentira, eso es obra, eso no sirve.
Anytime that you see that God has blessed someone because that person's procedure, that person's walk before God is pleasing to the Lord, and then one would say it's obvious that God has blessed that person, immediately those of super faith and super grace, they'll say that's not the way it is because you're preaching a faith that is done by works.
Así que este grupo dice que cualquier y todo comportamiento que tú y yo podamos decir, Dios bendijo, porque esa conducta, ese comportamiento le agradó, este grupo dice, no, no, eso es obra, eso es error.
So anytime that we see the biblical pattern established whereby God blesses someone because that person's procedure, that person's walk is pleasing unto him, these proponents would say that's not the case, that's not biblical.
Así que este grupo dice que el comportamiento humano no mueve la mano de Dios.
So this group in particular, the essence of what they're saying is that good behavior before the Lord does not move God's hand at all.
Pero qué cosa tan extraña cuando el ser humano se comporta de tal manera que ofende a Dios, eso sí mueve la mano de Dios porque despierta juicio.
But it's very curious because on the flip side, we see that when man misbehaves, that awakens God's judgment and wrath.
No pueden tomar las dos posiciones.
You can't be of both positions and say that there isn't a contradiction.
Si la conducta mala, el comportamiento pecaminoso, mueve la mano de Dios a tal grado que trae su juicio,
If sinful behavior, in essence, leads God to bring about his judgment and wrath,
entonces yo me quedo con la otra cara de la moneda que dice que el buen comportamiento mueve la mano de Dios para bendecir, para favorecer,
then
etc.
it stands to reason that if we do things according to God's mandates, his laws, his commandments, then God will favor us. He showers upon us his blessings.
Menciono todo esto porque la conducta que tenemos o debemos tener ante Dios para con nuestros hijos juega un rol importantísimo acerca de lo que Dios va a hacer a favor de la familia y de nuestros hijos.
I mention all of this because in the context of what we've just mentioned, if we act according to God's will, especially towards our children, then God will shower the families, our families, with blessings.
Y no digas es demasiado tarde porque en realidad, si como presenté inicialmente, llevas a cabo el arrepentimiento y la búsqueda de Dios, nunca es tarde. Dios puede obrar hoy y desea obrar hoy los cambios que tú y los tuyos necesitan.
There's an important point in all of this as well. Don't ever say in your mind and your heart, it's too late to rescue my children. Because at the end of the day, we are talking about God's grace being dispensed, especially if we live in accordance to God's will.
Cuidado con los que suministran error.
Be very careful with those that what they preach is error.
Creo que ya logré explicar la duplicidad de aquellos que dicen la conducta no mueve la mano de Dios.
I think we've been able to demonstrate in short order the duplicity, the contradiction of those whom say when man does good, God doesn't move in their favor.
Si el proceder pecaminoso produce juicio, la mano de Dios en la forma de juicio, el proceder justo mueve la mano de Dios en la forma de bendición.
If God's hand is moved in judgment and wrath because of man's misbehavior, then it stands to reason once again that God showers with favors and with blessings upon those that do his will.
Pero voy a dar otro ejemplo.
But I'll give another example.
En una ocasión se me acercó una persona para decirme lo siguiente.
On a given occasion, there was a person that approached me and told me as follows.
Me encontré esto, pero alguien me dijo que de yo quedarme con esto equivale a yo robar.
I found this particular thing at a given point, but then when I told someone about this thing that I found, they said, if I keep it, it's akin to stealing.
Le pregunté, ¿tú conoces al dueño?
And I asked the person, do you know the owner?
No fue la respuesta.
The answer was no.
¿Tienes alguna idea de cuánto tiempo aquello estuvo perdido?
Do you know how long this particular item was lost?
No, me dijo.
The person responded, no.
Porque entonces te dejas llevar por estas personas que ahora intentan hacerte creer que te has robado esto.
Now, why do you allow yourself then to be led by these people and to adopt guilt where no sin has been committed?
Bueno, pastor. Yo creo que sí, que quedarse con algo que no es de uno solo porque uno se lo encontró, eso es robar.
Well, Pastor, I believe that it's still wrong because if you take something that isn't yours, period, that's stealing.
Ah, entonces Jesús robó.
Well, I guess Jesus stole then.
Porque en una ocasión no tenían con ellos el dinero para pagar los impuestos, le dijo a Pedro, ve a pescar y lo que encuentres allí en la boca del pez, con eso vamos a pagar los impuestos.
Remember that at a given point, Jesus and the disciples didn't have enough to pay their taxes. And Jesus goes and tells Peter, go and fish. The first fish that you find, pluck out the coin that is in the fish's mouth, and we'll have enough there to pay our taxes.
Se da cuenta, amigo, amiga, que algunas personas presentan lo que ellos conocen como verdad tan bíblica, tan centrada, que no hay argumento contra aquello.
Do you know, dear brother, dear sister, that some people, they confidently express certain things as being biblical when in fact they have no basis on biblical truth?
De modo que retomamos el tema y vamos a ver cómo ciertamente Dios considera la conducta justa, recta y la bendice.
Therefore, now, understanding these things and having furnished examples, we're going to now furnish more proof as to how God blesses those that walk according to his will.
Pastor, pero usted no cree que si yo comienzo a ver las cosas así, Dios me va a castigar porque me estoy involucrando en obras.
Pastor, but don't you think that if I begin to think this way and act this way, that God is going to punish me because now I'm acting a certain way?
Cuando concluya la presentación, regresa al principio de la presentación, rebobina y échale oído a la explicación inicial 2 o 3 veces.
If you're still worried about this, I would ask you that once the transmission were to end, view it again from the very beginning, because the very beginning of it, we explain this very thing you're asking about.
Hechos 10, versículos 1 al 8.
Let us visit Acts chapter number 10, verses 1 through 8.
Había en Cesarea un hombre llamado Cornelio, centurión de la compañía llamada la Italiana.
There was a certain man in Caesarea called Cornelius, a centurion of what was called the Italian regiment.
Este tipo era un pillo, un sinvergüenza, un malvado que pisoteaba a todos los que podía.
This individual was a bully, and he made sure to trample upon all those who were beneath him.
Eso no es lo que el texto
That's
dice.
not what the text says, of course.
Piadoso y temeroso de Dios con toda su casa, y que hacía muchas limosnas al pueblo y oraba a Dios siempre.
A devout man, and one who feared God with all of his household, who gave alms generously to the people and prayed to God always.
Este vio claramente en una visión como a la hora novena del día que un ángel de Dios entraba donde él estaba y le decía, Cornelio.
About the 9th hour of the day, he saw clearly in a vision an angel of God coming in and saying to him, Cornelius.
Él mirándole fijamente y atemorizado dijo, ¿qué es, Señor?
And when he observed him, he was afraid and said, What is it, Lord?
Y le dijo, tus oraciones y tus limosnas han subido para memoria delante de Dios.
And the angel replied, Your prayers and your alms have come up for a memorial before God.
Y Dios me ha mandado para decirte que aborrece tus obras y tu comportamiento.
And God has sent me to you to tell you, I hate your works.
Eso no es lo que dice.
That's not what the text says, of course.
¿Pero qué está diciendo, pastor? Que Dios consideró el proceder de este hombre y por ende le envió a este mensajero.
Pastor, what are you saying, that God took into account this man's works and therefore God sent a messenger to him?
No lo estoy diciendo yo. Lee la versión que tú tengas de la Biblia y te darás cuenta que eso es precisamente lo que sucedió.
I'm not affirming this. Remember that we are reading this directly from the text. Whatever version you have, read it, and you'll note that the message is the same.
Envía pues ahora hombres a Jope y haz venir a Simón. Nótese para que no exista el error acerca de qué Simón, el ángel o Dios tiene en mente.
Now note, it says, now send men to Joppa and send for Simon. And now he's going to further elaborate, because there could be many Simons. He wants to be very specific as to what Simon.
Sí, no sé que le llegue Simón el carnicero y le diga, ¿por qué has enviado por mí?
It might be that this individual will send for Simon the butcher, and the butcher's asking, why are you calling for me?
Envía pues ahora hombres a Jope y haz venir a Simón el que tiene por sobrenombre Pedro.
Now send men to Joppa and send for Simon, whose surname is Peter.
Este posa en casa de cierto Simón curtidor que tiene su casa junto al mar. Él te dirá lo que es necesario que hagas.
Notice the specificity here. He is lodging with Simon, a tanner, whose house is by the sea. He will tell you what you must do.
Ido el ángel que hablaba con Cornelio, este llamó a 2 de sus criados y a un devoto soldado de los que le asistían.
And when the angel who spoke to him had departed, Cornelius had called 2 of his household servants and a devout soldier from among those who waited.
A los cuales envió a Jope después de haberles contado todo.
And then, so when he had explained all these things to them, he sent them to Joppa.
Ahí tienes una pieza de evidencia que corrobora que ciertamente Dios está observando.
Here you have one evidence that shows you that God is constantly observing.
otra pieza de evidencia.
Here's another piece of evidence.
Otro centurión.
Another centurion, curiously
Lucas
enough.
capítulo 7, versículos 1 al 9.
Luke 7, verses 1 through 9.
Después que hubo terminado todas sus palabras al pueblo que le oía, entró en Capernaum.
Now, when he concluded all his sayings in the hearing of the people, he entered Capernaum.
Y el siervo de un centurión a quien éste quería mucho estaba enfermo y a punto de morir.
And a certain centurion's servant who was dear to him was sick and ready to die.
Y el centurión dijo, si se muere este, yo tengo otros.
And the centurion said, "This guy dies, it doesn't matter. I have other servants."
Eso no es lo que dice el texto.
That's not what the text says.
¿Y qué es lo que dice? Que este centurión amaba mucho a su sirviente.
And what does this text say? In reality, it says that he loved this servant.
Bueno, cuando el centurión oyó hablar de Jesús, le envió unos ancianos de los judíos rogándole que viniese y sanase a su siervo.
So when he, the centurion, had heard about Jesus, he sent elders of the Jews to him, pleading with him to come and heal his servant.
Bueno, todavía los ancianos de Israel no andaban, vamos a decir, tan enojados con Jesús porque esto sucede en la primera parte de su ministerio.
Well, we can begin to see that the elders of the Jews weren't as incensed as they would be with Jesus eventually, because this happens towards the earlier part of Jesus' ministry.
Y ellos vinieron a Jesús y le rogaron con solicitud diciéndole, es digno que le concedas esto.
And when they came to Jesus, they begged him earnestly, saying that for the one for whom he should do this was deserving.
Nótese entonces que Lucas, el médico, investigador, toma el importante espacio para explicar, para corroborar que ciertamente era un individuo de muy buen comportamiento.
You'll note that Luke, the historian and the writer of this gospel, he makes note. He wants the reader to understand that this person was a do-gooder, as it were.
Es digno de que le concedas esto porque ama a nuestra nación y nos edificó una sinagoga.
The one for whom you should do this, they tell Jesus, is deserving, for he loves our nation and has built us a synagogue.
Y Jesús le respondió,
And Jesus replies,
a mí eso no me importa.
I couldn't care less.
Como si le construyó 5 sinagogas.
As if he would have built you 5 synagogues.
Eso no es lo que dice el texto.
That's not what the text
Y
says.
Jesús fue con ellos.
Then Jesus went with them.
Pero cuando, escuchen bien por favor, pero cuando ya no estaban lejos de la casa, el centurión envió a él unos amigos diciéndole, Señor, no te molestes, pues yo no soy digno de que entres bajo mi techo.
Now listen to the procedure here of events. It's very curious. And when he was already not far from the house, this is Jesus, the centurion sent friends to him saying, Lord, do not trouble yourself, for I am not worthy that you should enter under my roof.
De modo que Lucas muestra lo que estaba sucediendo en el corazón del centurión al decir, ama a su siervo y está buscando sanación para su siervo.
So Luke is very explicit in telling us that the centurion, has a very dear servant. He loves this person and he wants to see his servant cured.
Los ancianos manifiestan el comportamiento de este centurión diciendo, ama a nuestra nación, no se ha mostrado enemigo de nuestra nación, tanto así que ha edificado una sinagoga.
The elders speak very well of this individual to the point where the elders speak again highly of him, and they include that he favors the nation and that he also built them a synagogue.
Posiblemente era un proselito, un convertido.
Could be that this individual was a proselyte.
Jesús fue con ellos.
Now Jesus goes with them.
Nótese algo más que revela Lucas acerca de este hombre.
Note that Luke reveals something else about this man as well.
Su humildad.
His humility.
No entres a casa, yo no soy digno. Aunque esta gente te ha dicho que yo soy digno de que tú entres a mi casa.
Note the message that he sends to Jesus. Even though these people have told you I'm deserving of your visit, I'm not deserving of your visit. I'm not deserving that you were to enter my roof.
Soy tan indigno que ni tan siquiera cobré el ánimo para presentarme ante ti. Te mandé a las personas que mandé a ti.
I am so undignified that I sent representatives to represent myself before you.
¿Qué hizo Jesús?
What did Jesus do?
Dio la palabra y el siervo sanó.
He simply gave out the word and the servant became healed.
2 piezas de evidencia.
Now we have 2 evidences.
Aquí viene la tercera. Tengo 2 más.
Here's a third. There are 2 others.
Job capítulo 1 versículos 6 al 10.
We have Job chapter number 1.
Pastor, ¿qué estamos considerando? Porque se me escapó de la vista.
Pastor, what is it that we're considering in these series of texts? Because my mind escapes me now.
Que Dios ciertamente está atento a la conducta del ser humano.
That God is attentive to man's behavior.
Y cuando nuestra conducta le agrada, ciertamente su mano se mueve a nuestro favor.
And when we behave in accordance to his will and it pleases God, he blesses us.
No solo a nuestro favor individualmente, sino a favor de la familia, a favor de nuestros hijos.
Not only in our favor, but also in the favor of our families, our children, what have you.
Estamos corroborando entonces que Dios ciertamente considera, está atento a la conducta del ser humano.
We're considering that God is attentive to man's conduct.
Job capítulo 1, versículos 6 al 10.
Job 1, verses 6 through 10.
Un día vinieron a presentarse delante del Señor los hijos de Dios, entre los cuales también, sí, allí estaba Satanás.
Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and among that group was Satan himself.
Y el Señor dijo a Satanás, ¿de dónde vienes?
And the Lord asked Satan, from where do you come?
Respondió Satanás al Señor, dijo, de rodear la tierra y de andar por ella.
As if God didn't know, right? It was a
Right.
rhetorical question. So Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro on the earth, and from walking back and forth on it.
Escuchen lo que Dios dice acerca de Job, porque a mi parecer corrobora que Dios está prestando atención a lo que nosotros hacemos o dejamos de hacer.
Listen to what God answers here with respect to Job, because it's evident that God knew what Job was doing.
Y el Señor dijo a Satanás, ¿no has considerado a mi siervo Job, que no hay otro como él en la tierra, varón perfecto y recto, temeroso de Dios y apartado del mal?
Then the Lord said to Satan, have you set your heart against my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, one who fears God and shuns evil?
Considere lo que Satanás había observado.
Note what Satan himself had observed about Job.
Respondiendo Satanás al Señor, dijo, ¿acaso teme Job a Dios de balde?
Satan answers the Lord saying, does Job fear God for nothing?
¿No le ha acercado alrededor a él y a su casa y a todo lo que tiene? Al trabajo de sus manos has dado bendición, por tanto sus bienes han aumentado sobre la tierra.
Have you not protected him around his household and all around that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and the possessions of his land have increased.
Ahí tienen tres piezas de evidencia que ciertamente corroboran que Dios está mirando, Dios está observando, y aquellos que le agradan, Él los bendice.
You'll note three evidences that we have given where God is observing the behavior of certain men. And when these men walk in accordance to his will, God blesses them.
Antes de dar la cuarta pieza de evidencia, quiero citar lo que dice en el segundo libro de las Crónicas de los Reyes de Israel, el capítulo 16, el versículo 9.
Now, before we give the last evidence for what we are providing during this transmission, I'd like for you to visit with us Second Book of Chronicles, chapter number 16, and we're going to read verse number 9.
Este verso te muestra de una manera muy específica que ciertamente el Señor está considerando toda conducta humana.
This verse very clearly delineates that God is carefully considering every single act that man were to undertake.
Porque los ojos del Señor contemplan toda la tierra para mostrar su poder a favor de los que tienen corazón perfecto para con Él.
For the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth to show himself strong on behalf of those whose heart is loyal to him.
¿Cómo dijo, pastor?
What? Wait a minute. Can you repeat that?
Lo voy a leer una vez más.
I'll read it again.
2 Crónicas 16:9.
Second Book of Chronicles 16:9.
Porque los ojos del Señor contemplan toda la tierra para mostrar su poder a favor de los que tienen corazón perfecto para con Él.
For the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth to show himself strong on behalf of those whose heart is loyal to him.
Contemplar. ¿Qué significa contemplar?
Notice what it says here. In essence, to contemplate,
Poner la atención en algo.
to place attention on,
Considerar o tener presente algo o a alguien.
to consider or to have someone under consideration.
De modo que los ojos del Señor contemplan toda la tierra. ¿Qué está buscando? Personas que tengan corazón perfecto para con Él.
What is God contemplating when he looks upon earth? Men whose hearts are loyal to him.
Corazón perfecto no significa que eres indefectible, que tú no cometes errores.
Now, when we're speaking about loyalty, understand that we're still talking about fallen man here. It's not as if we're perfect. We do have our frailties and our weaknesses.
Significa que tu corazón se inclina a Dios.
What this means, loyalty means, is that your heart is inclined towards God.
Y esto se manifiesta en desenvolvimiento, en conducta, en comportamiento.
And this is demonstrated in the way that one behaves.
¿Y por qué busca Dios a estas personas?
And why does God search out for these people?
¿Qué quiere hacer?
What does he want to do?
Mostrar su poder a favor de los que tienen corazón perfecto para con Él.
To show himself strong, other versions say to demonstrate his power on behalf of those whose heart is loyal to him.
Me parece que está claro el asunto.
It seems to me that it's very clear.
Cuidado con los que te dicen gracia, más gracia, super gracia, extra gracia, extra, 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 extra gracia.
Be careful with these individuals who would constantly preach grace, 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 more grace, and another little anecdote of grace, and even more grace on top of that.
Y si tú, por alguna casualidad, mencionas conducta, comportamiento, dicen obras, 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 y te hacen así, y te despiden, y te denuncian.
And if on any instance you dare mention behavior, they'll say, no, wait, that's acts. And they might even do the cross to try to rebuke you in some way, shape, or form.
Pero he dado 3 ejemplos y hay muchos otros que ciertamente corroboran que Dios lo está considerando todo, especialmente la conducta del ser humano.
We've given 3 examples, and there are many others, by the way, where it speaks about how God considers man's behavior.
El cuarto nos ayuda a enlazar más perfectamente lo que el comportamiento que debemos tener ante Dios para con la familia y los hijos hace o logra, hablando de cómo Dios entonces favorece si nos desenvolvemos así.
The 4th example that we will furnish is a more perfect example with respect to the topic that we are dealing with today, where how one moves in a certain way within one's family, and then how God showers that family with blessings.
Génesis capítulo 18, versículos 17 al 23.
Genesis 18, verses 17 through 23.
Y el Señor dijo, ¿encubriré yo a Abraham lo que voy a hacer?
And the Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham what I am doing?
Habiendo de ser Abraham una nación grande y fuerte, y habiendo de ser benditas en él todas las naciones de la tierra.
Since Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him.
Presten atención a lo que Dios prestó atención.
Now pay attention to what God is focusing on.
Porque yo sé que mandará a sus hijos y a su casa después de sí que guarden el camino del Señor, haciendo justicia y juicio, para que haga venir el Señor sobre Abraham lo que ha hablado acerca de él.
Pay close attention, for I have known him, in order that he may commend his children and his household after him, that they keep the way of the Lord, to do righteousness and justice, that the Lord may bring to Abraham what he has spoken to him.
La Escritura dice que Abraham es amigo de Dios.
The scripture teaches that Abraham is a friend to God.
Y Jesús dijo que nosotros somos sus amigos, que Él nos considera amigos si hacemos lo que Él ordena.
And Jesus says that we are his friends so long as we do what he commands.
Y aquí vemos que agradó a Dios, y por cuanto Dios no cambia, yo me atrevo a decir, sigue agradando a Dios.
And we see here that obviously Abraham's procedure, his behavior, it pleased God, and I dare say that it continues to please God.
Que aquellos que temen a Dios, que aman a Dios, toman una postura de instruiré a mis hijos en el camino del Señor.
And the pattern continues to this day, the pattern which says, I will instruct my children in the admonition, in the ways of the Lord.
El Nuevo Testamento lo presenta con las siguientes palabras.
The New Testament presents it thus.
Criar a vuestros hijos en la disciplina y en la amonestación del Señor.
Raising our children in the discipline, in the admonition of the Lord.
Pastor, pero es que yo así he criado a mis hijitos y ahora me han salido tan malos.
Well, Pastor, the problem is that I've raised my children in such a way, and yet I'm not seeing the fruits of that.
Pero te pregunto y debes contestar con toda sinceridad.
But I ask you, and I ask you to answer with all sincerity, with all honesty.
¿Entregaste a tus hijos al sistema de educación?
Did you, for example, offer up your kids, render them to the educational system?
¿Le permitiste ver cualquier cosa que apareciera en la pantalla chica?
Did you permit them to watch anything that they were to watch which appears on the small screen?
¿Estabas atento a las amistades, a las personas de su edad que se acercaban a él, a ella?
Were you attentive to the people that surrounded your child and influenced them?
Puedo seguir enumerando si gustan,
I can continue to enumerate different things that are shortcomings from parents.
pero se dan cuenta por qué dije que lo primero que tenemos que hacer para conseguir la libertad, el rescate de nuestros hijos es decirle a Dios, te fallé.
But now you begin to understand why at the very beginning of this message I said it is important for parents to recognize their shortcomings and to repent before the Lord.
¿Y usted cree, pastor, que de yo proceder así, el Señor escuche entonces mis ruegos y mis súplicas?
Pastor, do you think that if I were to proceed in the way that you're prescribing, that God were to listen to my supplications and my prayers?
Por supuesto,
Absolutely.
por supuesto.
Absolutely.
¿Qué ocurre cuando Dios considera a Abraham? Está considerando su conducta.
we see here that when God is considering Abraham, what is he considering? His behavior.
No solo que obedeció en salirse de Ur de los Caldeos,
Not only in that Abraham obeyed, leaving his father's land and household, Ur of the Chaldeans,
sino que instruiría a sus hijos y a su casa después de él.
but note that he said that he would instruct his children and his household, in other words, future generations.
Y esto agradó tanto a Dios que Dios lo hizo, por así decirlo, un socio en el proceder divino.
And this pleased God so much that he made him an associate, as it were, of the training, as it were, of the Lord.
Pero como un socio en el proceder divino.
But what do you mean an associate in the divine procedures?
Lo que hemos leído lo muestra. Lo que Dios iba a hacer en Sodoma y Gomorra, decidió comunicárselo a Abraham.
But the Bible itself answers that question for us. Note that God says, I'm not going to hide from Abraham, that I'm going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah.
Estas cosas se comparten únicamente con los socios o con un amigo.
Remember, these are plans that one only shows to associates or even more intimately to friends.
¿Tú no le compartes todos tus planes a todas las personas que aparecen en tu vida?
Do you share all of your most intimate plans to everyone that appears in your life?
¿Tú compartes con las personas que tú entiendes que forman parte de tu círculo más cercano?
Remember that you share your most intimate plans with those whom are part of your inner circle.
Igual Dios.
Same thing with God.
Sí, pero usted le llama un socio.
Yeah, but you use the word associate.
¿Por qué entonces permitió Dios que Abraham entrara en esta intercesión rogando por Sodoma y Gomorra?
Why is it then, if this isn't the case, that God allowed Abraham to enter into this sort of intercession to save Sodom and Gomorrah perchance?
Creemos conocer a Dios. Alardeamos de cuánto le conocemos y cuán cerca de Él andamos.
Now, many of us Christians, we have the tendency to boast about how intimately we know God and His ways.
Pero lo cierto es que no le conocemos tanto como decimos y no caminamos tan cerca de Él como aseveramos.
But the fact of the matter remains that we don't know Him as intimately as we say we know Him, and we don't walk as closely to Him as we say that we do.
De caminar estrechamente con el Señor no le permitiríamos a los de la supergracia clasificar todo comportamiento como obra.
If this weren't the case, we wouldn't allow these people whom are proponents of super grace to have us believe that good behavior in essence is not really a thing before God.
Porque los cristianos todos entendemos que por gracia somos salvos por medio de la fe y que esto no es nuestro.
Because we all understand, scripturally speaking, that we are saved by grace and this is a gift of God. It's not something that comes from ourselves.
Pero la Escritura enseña, Pablo, escribiendo a los Gálatas, que la fe obra por el amor.
But remember that Paul also writes to the Galatians that faith operates through love.
De modo que nuestro desenvolvimiento, nuestro comportamiento, nada tiene que ver con pagar por la salvación, sino un deseo profundo de agradar a Dios.
Therefore, our walk has nothing to do, in order to gain salvation, as some would present it, it has to do with being thankful unto the Lord.
Y un deseo profundo de ver su mano amparando, protegiendo y sacando al frente en victoria, en triunfo, a la totalidad de nuestros seres queridos.
And also with a desire to see that God were to shower upon us His blessings so that our entire generations were to be fruitful in Him.
Dios ha dicho, ha manifestado lo que Él lleva en su corazón acerca de los chicos, de los jóvenes.
God has already stated before what He's manifested about what He desires from young people.
Y nosotros debemos ser de una opinión, si prefieren esa expresión, con Dios. Debemos pensar, anhelar y proceder como Él piensa, anhela y procede acerca de los jóvenes.
And we should be in alignment, in perfect alignment with what God desires, commands from young people.
El Salmo 127, versículo 3,
We'll find in the 127th Psalm, verse 8,
trata esto.
it deals with this, what we've just mentioned.
Y recuerden que este es un salmo cuyo entorno es la familia.
And remember that the epicenter of this psalm has to deal with family life.
He aquí, herencia del Señor son los hijos, cosa de estima el fruto del vientre.
Once again, 127th Psalm, verse 3, Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward.
Me parece que Dios se expresó.
It seems to me that God expressed Himself on the matter a long time ago.
Cosa de estima.
Think about it. Something to be esteemed.
Me parece que está hablando de el alto precio, lo valioso que son los chicos.
Talks to me about the high worth that children are.
Luego, uno de los clásicos del Nuevo Testamento.
Then we also have one of the more classic verses of the New Testament.
Mateo 19, versículos 13 y 14.
Matthew 19, verses 13 and 14.
Entonces le fueron presentados unos niños para que pusiese las manos sobre ellos,
Then little children were brought to him that he might put his hands on them and pray.
para que pusiese las manos sobre ellos y orase, y los discípulos les reprendieron.
But the disciples rebuked them.
El maestro anda ocupado, saquen a los niños que molestan.
Tell the little children to leave. They're bothering the rabbi.
Pero Jesús dijo,
But Jesus said,
dejad a los niños venir a mí y no se lo impidáis porque de los tales es el reino de los cielos.
let the little children come to me, and do not forbid them, for of such is the kingdom of heaven.
Jesús dijo que si le causas tropiezo a un pequeño, lo mejor sería nunca aprender a nadar, a atarte al cuello una piedra bien pesada y echarte en algún océano profundo.
Remember that Jesus himself says that it would be, if anybody were to try to disturb, destroy, twist a child, that it would be best for that person to attach a millstone to his neck and to basically launch himself out to the middle of the sea.
Entonces, ¿cómo vas a reaccionar ante el llamamiento de Dios que te dice, tienes obligaciones para con tus hijos?
So how are you going to react before the obligation that we each and every one of us have to find ourselves to be good stewards of our children?
¿Responderás como respondió Abraham o responderá como respondió Elí?
Would you respond the way that Abraham responded, or would you respond in the way the prophet, or rather the priest Eli responded?
Elí dijo, Jehová es que haga Jehová lo que le parezca.
Eli, in a nonchalant way, basically said, "It is God, let him do as he pleases."
¿Por qué respondió así? Porque a través del joven profeta le dijo, tus hijos son unos sinvergüenzas.
Why did he respond in this way? Because through the young prophet Samuel, he said, "Your children are corrupt."
Y ciertamente eran corruptos.
And certainly they were corrupt.
Y sabemos que su fin no fue bueno.
And we know that his end was not a good one.
Entonces, para concluir, queremos aportar solución para mamá y para papá.
So, to give solutions, we want to present this, as it were, to mother, to father, so that they can implement these things in their family lives.
Repito, una enorme cantidad de familias, de personas, esconden su sufrimiento de los ojos del público, pero el sufrimiento está allí en lo profundo del corazón.
As I said earlier, there are plenty of families that they do a lot of posturing before the public, but the pain is nevertheless present in their hearts.
Y es mi parecer en el asunto que Dios quiere traer soluciones a las personas, a las familias, a los hogares.
And God wants to give solutions to men, to women, families, so as to strengthen themselves in the Lord.
Aquí están los pasos a tomar, sencillos, ¿no?
Here are the steps to take, and they're very simple.
Presta atención a lo que está sucediendo.
Be very attentive and detailed in that attention to what is happening.
¿Por qué Facebook me tiene la mirilla y quieren cancelar nuestros muros?
Why is it that, for example, Facebook continues to threaten us with canceling our page?
Porque denunciamos las mentiras de la hora.
Because we denounce the lies of the day and age.
O sea, estamos atentos a lo que está sucediendo.
In other words, we have our ears to the ground, as is commonly said in American circles.
A principio de semana, no sé si lo haré el lunes, el martes o el miércoles.
At the beginning of the week with the podcast for PVN, I don't know what edition in particular, but we will
PVN.
present it. This is during PVN, our daily podcast through pvradio.org.
Voy a dar más evidencia de lo que el sistema de educación está haciendo para malograr a nuestros hijos.
I will continue to give more evidence as to what the educational system is doing to twist the minds and hearts of the youth.
Las dos presentaciones más recientes en Facebook tratan este tema.
The two most recent posts that we have placed on Facebook, they deal directly with this issue.
Pero vamos a tratarlo con más detalles en PBN.
But we'll more in depth, in a more detailed manner, we'll deal with this during the
El
podcast.
lunes, el martes o el miércoles les tendré ese reporte.
Earlier in the week, just continue to listen and we'll delve into that subject.
Presta atención a lo que está sucediendo, si no, no puedes reaccionar, no puedes hacer lo correcto.
Pay attention to what is happening. Be sensitive, as it were, to what is happening. Otherwise, you won't be able to react.
Muchas de las actividades que destruyen a los chicos, estos malvados las hacen volar muy por debajo de lo que el radar humano logra captar.
Many of the things that destroy our children's hearts, you'll note that they try to fly these things under the radar so that parents won't ever detect it.
Así que tienes que prestar atención y número 2, tienes que educarte, prepararte para contrarrestar las operaciones que Satanás ha levantado contra tus hijos.
So number one, you obviously have to pay attention, but number two, you have to educate yourself to be able to counteract whatever it is that the world wants to inculcate in your children.
¿De qué te vale prestar atención y educarte si luego no vas a luchar? Tienes que luchar.
What's the worth of educating yourself? In reality, you're not going to use that education for anything. No, you educate yourself so as to use it for a very particular purpose.
Si tu lucha resulta en que únicamente los tuyos te escuchan, perfecto.
If it results that only your own children were to listen to what you have learned, that's fine.
Pero me sospecho que algo más grande va a suceder.
But I suspect that something with greater impulse is going to happen.
Yo he luchado por los míos. Gio está luchando por los suyos.
I've fought for my own children. Gio's fighting for his own children.
Pero resulta que no solo nos ha bendecido Dios a nosotros, sino que a través de nosotros ha bendecido a muchos y los resultados que han logrado son los mismos que nosotros estamos disfrutando.
But it's a curious thing because not only have we fought for our families, but God has used what we're doing within our families to bless others so that other families can be protected as well.
4.
Number 4.
Reconstruye y repara el altar de la familia.
You have to build, you have to repair, as it were, the family altar, so to speak.
¿Tú crees que enviar a los chicos una hora, una vez a la semana a la escuela dominical contrarresta la operación de 6, 7 horas en las manos de los maestros de este siglo?
Do you actually believe that sending your kids to Sunday school for about 45 minutes every Sunday is going to be enough of an effort to counteract everything that your children are absorbing? The 8 hours that they're in school, the time that they're with their friends, and also what they're watching through media?
Restaura el altar del hogar, el altar de la familia.
Restore the family altar, as it were.
Recuerda el rol de la oración, del estudio bíblico, de la conversación que tiene como centro la Biblia, la voluntad de Dios.
Prayer, conversation, and Bible study. These things have to revolve around God.
Finalmente,
Finally,
el quinto paso, sencillo, pero difícil de cumplir con él.
this is, some would say, the simplest out of the counsel, but in reality, it does take effort to stay with it.
Persevera.
And this is perseverance.
Pero eso es sencillo.
Well, again, that's simple.
¿Has tratado de perseverar?
Have you tried to persevere?
Todo el que ha tratado de perseverar en algo sabe que una cosa es llegar a la cima, otra es quedarse ahí arriba.
Everybody that has attempted to persevere at something understands it's one thing to arrive at the zenith of the mountain. It's another thing to stay up there.
¿Pudiera darme un ejemplo, pastor?
Could you give me an example?
¿Se ha fijado usted cuánta gente adelgazó solo para retomar lo que perdió y algo más?
Have you ever noticed the amount of people, for example, that have lost weight only to regain it and something else?
Porque en vez de decir voy a abrazar una nueva manera de alimentarme, simplemente se dedicaron a adelgazar un poco.
Because instead of embracing, for example, a new diet for the rest of their existence, they simply tried to lose weight and then the project ended there.
En conclusión,
In conclusion,
algunos te dirán que Dios no presta atención, no se fija en la conducta, en el comportamiento del ser humano.
some will attempt to tell you that God does not focus on man's behavior.
Pero lo cierto del caso es que hemos mostrado por la Escritura que Dios presta atención a aquello.
But we have demonstrated through Scripture that God does, in fact, pay attention to man's behavior.
Segundo libro de las Crónicas de los Reyes de Israel, capítulo 16, versículo 9.
2 Chronicles, chapter number 16, verse number 19.
Porque los ojos del Señor contemplan toda la tierra para mostrar su poder a favor de los que tienen corazón perfecto para con Él.
You read it once again?
Porque los ojos del Señor contemplan toda la tierra para mostrar su poder a favor de los que tienen corazón perfecto para con Él. Segundo libro de las Crónicas, capítulo 16, versículo 9.
2 Chronicles 16:9. Once again, for the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth to show himself strong on behalf of those whose heart is loyal to him.
No te dejes engañar. Dios presta atención a lo que hacemos y dejamos de hacer.
Do not be deceived. God does pay attention to what we do and don't do.
Y lo curioso del caso es que si hemos prestado atención a todo esto,
And the curious thing about all of this is that if we've paid attention,
hay un poco más de luz ahora para aquellos que han intentado conocer el famosísimo verso que trata el asunto de la salvación.
there is more light, as it were, to deal with now the texts that deal with salvation.
Cree en el Señor Jesucristo
Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ,
y serás salvo tú y tu casa.
and you will be saved, you and your household.
Ese verso merece más consideración, pero creo que nos vamos acercando a una mejor comprensión del mismo.
The verse certainly requires further elaboration, further study, but I think we begin to understand what the verse actually means.
No olviden, amados hermanos, queridas hermanas, que pueden enviar sus ofrendas a través del enlace que aparece al pie de la presentación.
Do not forget, brethren, that we need your support. You can send your tithes and your offerings through the link that we have provided either through the chat or beneath the video presentation in the link below.
De antemano queríamos decirle gracias. La próxima semana nos vamos a presentar en vivo en Tropical Park.
Next week, well, we have actually Wednesday's transmission.
That's true. Correct.
Wednesday's transmission of Living Word Live at 8:30 p.m. We'd like to talk about thinking.
El miércoles tenemos la próxima edición de Palabra Viva en Vivo. Vamos a hablar de pensar, de la importancia de pensar, ¿no?
Believe it or not, this subject that has been delved on today and Wednesdays, they're intimately intertwined.
Créalo usted o no, el tema que acabamos de presentar y el del miércoles están enlazados.
One of the things that has happened, for example, to many parents is that they've stopped analyzing their kids. And I'm not talking about psychotherapy here.
Una de las cosas que ha sucedido entre los padres y los hijos es que los padres han dejado de analizar lo que en realidad está sucediendo y no estamos hablando de psicoterapia, ¿eh?
Understand that as a parent, we have to be sensible to the shortcomings, but also the strengths of each of our children.
Tenemos todos nosotros como padres que estar al tanto y reconocer cuáles son las flaquezas, así como también los puntos fuertes en el carácter de nuestros hijos.
But if we don't stop to think upon these things, to ponder these things, how then can we place solutions for our children's lives?
Pero si no reparamos en estas cosas, si no las consideramos debidamente, ¿cómo entonces lograremos soluciones para la vida, para nuestros hijos?
Therein is one example of the joy, the pleasure that comes with thinking.
Y ahí entonces tienen un ejemplo, una muestra de el gozo que produce pensar adecuadamente, debidamente.
So that'll be the subject matter for Wednesday, 8:30 p.m. through pvradio.org.
Así que ese es el tema para el miércoles 8:30 pasado meridiano.
Also, we remind the English-speaking audience for the next live stream of Absolute Truth, Absolutely.
Y también para los que dominan el inglés, prefieren el inglés y el inglés está en el epicentro de su existencia, recuerden la edición de ATA, este es el jueves a las 8 pasado meridiano.
8 p.m. You can visit atapodcast.org for more information.
Visiten el sitio web una vez más.
atapodcast.org.
atapodcast.podcast.org.
And finally, sorry, you were going to say something?
Sí, el domingo que vamos a estar en...
On Wednesday, next Sunday, we will be gathering live, in person, in the flesh again, Tropical Park.
Y finalmente, recuerden, si pierden contacto con nosotros porque nos desaparecen de Facebook, les he amonestado a través de Facebook una y otra vez, suscríbanse a nuestro canal en Telegram porque no somos agradables a Facebook. Comentamos, opinamos, presentamos la verdad bíblica y esto no les complace.
We continue to warn the audience that it seems as if our days on Facebook, and this is not sensationalism, by the way, it seems as if our days on Facebook are counted because what we post on Facebook does not please the overlords at Facebook. So we ask you to visit and to subscribe to our channel on Telegram because there you'll continue to get the updates with respect to everything we post on the ministry.
La más reciente amenaza llegó esta madrugada.
The most recent threat that we received from Facebook over cancellation was this morning.
Lo explico porque luego me encuentran o me llaman o algo sucede y dicen, usted se nos escondió. Yo estoy aquí, seguimos presentándonos, nosotros no nos estamos escondiendo, le estamos diciendo lo que está sucediendo.
The reason I warn this is because some would say, you disappeared. We haven't disappeared. They've tried to disappear us. They've tried to bury us under the ground. We're still here. We're still doing the labor. So we're still present. Just remember, subscribe to our channel on Telegram.
Gracias mil por la sintonía. Les enviamos un abrazo fraterno a través del ciberespacio.
Thank you once again for viewing this transmission. We send you a warm hug through cyberspace.
Hasta la próxima. Bendiciones para todos.
Until the next occasion, many blessings to you and yours.